Hello, folks. Welcome to this last session of our very interesting series on international development and procurement issues in international development. We've been very privileged to have a great panel this week as we worked through various issues. In the first day, we had an overview of issues. We also talked about developments in UNCITRAL, the UN Commission on International Trade Law, Model Procurement Law. And on the second day, we talked about contract administration issues in international development. And I thought that was a Vinay did a terrific job. Vinay Sharma did a terrific job outlining issues there. And Jean-Jacques Verdot, who's with us today, discussed what's happening at the World Bank. That was a fascinating overview of important developments at the World Bank. And we're also joined then by Matteo Amerigo de Laurentiis, who talked about some key issues in terms of enhancing procurement at the World Bank. Now, on this third day, the third and last day, we're going to be talking about anti-corruption issues. We're going to start with Professor Sope Williams, whom I'm very proud to note is my newest colleague in our program at George Washington University Law School. She's been a colleague for many, many years. And she is much younger than I am, but she has done a wonderful job over the years, and she's been really a very important colleague for us in terms of having an ongoing discussion about important issues in anti-corruption. She'll be talking about some important developments, and Prabhat will also be talking about some important developments in anti-corruption in development. One of the important interchanges that Sope and I have had over the years is how we deal with anti-corruption and procurement from different normative places. For example, if we rely very heavily on a mechanical theory, which we'll be talking about, like the principal agent theory, does that adequately capture what the true anti-corruption imperatives are in a given culture or a given nation? And I've added to the materials on the program website with the program background material literature that Sope has done and others have done on these important issues. And I recommend those to you if you want to look at the program website. I'll be putting that citation up in just a second. As before, the videos from the first 2 days are already up. The materials from the first 2 days are already up, publicprocurementinternational.com. The videos are also going to be in the GW Law Government Procurement Law YouTube page, and the chat is also the chat from the first 2 days, which includes a lot of resources, is available there on the Public Procurement International website, if you like. Today, we have speakers from many different areas and many different functions. Should stress that any statements that they make today are in their personal capacity. We've had over 450 registrants, almost 500 now, from around the world, from many, many different countries. These webinars are an important opportunity to pull together the international procurement community and to reaffirm what's really important, which is to use procurement as a means of achieving the best possible outcomes for the men, women, and children of the countries that are affected. So it's a real privilege for us to be able to do these webinars and bring everyone together. As I said, this is the third of 3 sessions, and we have with us Sope Williams and Prabhat Garg. I'm going to be introducing them individually as we go through, and I'm very grateful that they could join us today. Benedetta Audio is also joining me as a co-moderator. Benedetta, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back for the final session on our series of our series on international development procurement. So over the past 2 sessions, we've heard from colleagues at UNDP, the World Bank, and UNCITRAL. And if there is one thread running through all of it, it is this: procurement rules only matter if they hold under pressure. Today, we turn to the pressure that matters most, and that is corruption. And that is why this closing session matters. We've spent 2 sessions on how the system is supposed to work. Today, we ask what happens when it does not, and what tools, legal, institutional, and technological, actually catch it in time. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Benedetta. So our first speaker today will be Sope Williams. She's joining the faculty of George Washington University Law School in next month. We're delighted that we can have her. She's she's just a luminary internationally, and it's a wonderful thing for our program. She's a professor of public procurement law consultant, and also the deputy director of the African Procurement Law Unit at Stellenbosch University. She's an expert in public procurement law and policy in Africa, procurement and the multilateral development banks, gender responsive procurement, emergency contracting, sustainable public procurement, and anti-corruption law. She's developed anti-corruption courses for UNODC and the UN Virtual School and served as an academic member of the World Bank's Procurement Technical Advisory Group. She's an editor of 4 international journals and a vice chair of the Anti-Corruption Committee of the International Bar Association. She developed and teaches in the LLM and PG DIP program in public procurement regulation and policy at Stellenbosch University. She has an LLM with distinction from the London School of Economics and a PhD in public procurement and anti-corruption law from the University of Nottingham in England. Her research has been cited by the South African Constitutional Court, which is a very big deal. That's a very, very important court in shaping the future of South Africa. Prabhat Garg is also joining us, and he and Vinay have been cornerstones to developing this program. I'm very grateful to the two of them for helping make this seminar series possible. He's an international program management and public procurement expert with about 40 years of experience with multilateral development banks and bilateral development partner agencies working across the globe in several countries, including in the former Soviet region. He worked with the World Bank from 1984 to 2000, where he designed and managed international programs, projects, and procurements in various positions. In 2006, he joined the U.S. federal government working on international public procurement, where he worked in the senior executive service, grade levels, leading international public procurement practice group that developed policies and managed procurements funded by a U.S. government's foreign aid agency, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, or MCC. Just for those who are from outside the United States, the senior executive service that Prabhat worked in is the most prestigious. It's the elite of the civil service in the U.S. government. So it's a real mark of honor for Prabhat and for other members of the senior executive service. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sope, and thank you again for joining us, Professor Williams.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to colleagues that are not in the US, or good evening, wherever you are. First, I have to say thank you, Chris, for inviting me. I'm obviously so glad to be joining you at GW. And I look forward to us, having a great working relationship and having a lot of fun. So what I want to talk about this morning is I want to talk about a few things that have happened over the last, I'll say 18 months in international anti-corruption law and enforcement and the impact that that's having. When Benedetta was giving her remarks, she talked about the fact that for this session, we're looking at what are the tools that we have at disposal when procurement doesn't go as planned, when corruption is part of the process. And so I want to talk about the tools that we've had and how those tools have been holding up over the last 18 months and really what's happening in the global arena. So I'm going to start talking about what happened in January 2025, which shocked the international development community, but possibly the international anti-corruption community didn't recognize the impact that it would have. So in January 2025, I think on the 24th of January, President Trump issued an executive order against USAID. And so it was a near total freeze on all foreign aid. And by March, about 83% of USAID's programs had been canceled, involving thousands of contracts. And I think since July of last year, USAID has more or less ceased to function. But what is important in the context of anti-corruption enforcement is that a lot of the foreign aid that went through USAID was to support anti-corruption programs. So USAID was funding a lot of NGOs that were doing research in a lot of developing countries, developing tools to address corruption in public sector and private sector, to also address things like human rights abuses and things like that. So you had a lot of these NGOs funded by USAID working in different countries around the world, working even in authoritarian regimes to address corruption, address human rights abuses, provide legal services for victims of those regimes. So the collapse of USAID was very loud, very significant, but it had a deeper impact for anti-corruption enforcement because, of course, while we had visibility on the executive order addressing enforcement of the FCPA, USAID's work in anti-corruption was a lot of soft power, right? It was work that didn't get the headlines, but it was work that was really important in terms of international anti-corruption law. So that was one piece of the puzzle when we can say international anti-corruption law enforcement began to unravel. Of course, in February of the same year, we then had the executive order in the US, again from President Trump, directing the Attorney General to pause investigations and enforcement actions under the FCPA. Of course, if you know the history of the FCPA, it was the first domestic law that addressed extraterritorial corruption and bribery and was instrumental in things like the OECD anti-bribery conventions that we have now, and the fact that we now, routinely criminalize foreign bribery. So the FCPA and the US's role in addressing foreign bribery has been of immense significance to the way the anti-corruption legal framework has shaped up. So anyway, February 2025, we have this executive order asking the Attorney General to pause enforcement. And there was a phrase in the executive order saying that they should stop over-expansive and unpredictable FCA enforcement against American citizens and businesses, saying that was harming American economic competitiveness and threatening national security. So since that executive order, the FCPA has more or less paused a lot of its enforcement. There was then guidelines issued in June 2025, which basically then said what the Attorney General could do under the FCPA, and saying that the FCPA should focus on eliminating cartels and transnational criminal organizations, safeguarding opportunities for U.S. companies, advancing U.S. national security interests, and prioritizing investigations of serious misconduct as opposed to quote unquote routine business practices. So the other thing that the guidelines did, apart from listing these 4 areas where we should have enforcement, the other thing that the guidelines did is that they required that the focus should be on individuals and not on corporations. So of course that has an immense impact on FCPA enforcement. And FCPA enforcement was really the main tool that the global international community relied on for addressing foreign bribery. If you had ever done research and looked at some of those enforcement actions, you would find that it wasn't just US companies, it was companies across the globe. And many of the countries where there is a problem with systemic corruption, where their governments may not be taking action, we found that the FCPA or the US would step in and enforce those laws against those countries and against those companies. So because of what has happened with these executive orders, there's been a big a shift, and there've been attempts for other countries to step in and fill the void. And so what has happened is that Europe and some European countries have tried to respond to this pause on foreign bribery actions as we knew it. And so in 2025, a number of countries from Europe, the UK, France, Switzerland, announced that they would create a new task force to strengthen collaboration on efforts to tackle international bribery and corruption. And the UK Serious Fraud Office also announced that they would join at the International Anti-Corruption Coordination Center, and that they would seek to enforce the UK Bribery Act, which also has significant jurisdiction over foreign bribery, that they would seek to enforce that in cases where the US was not going to do so. So we basically had a few European countries come together and say, okay, we can't allow this gap to continue, and we will try to step in. Of course, we have to take into account the fact that the US had a a bigger scale in terms of resources to address foreign bribery, where the European countries may not be willing to commit those same resources to doing that. So we have the UK, and the other countries intending to step into that gap. We have the UK Serious Frauds Office saying that they would try to prosecute companies where they have breached the UK Bribery Act. And we've had a few investigations under that. What is also interesting is that apart from the countries in Europe, we also have within the US states like California reminding businesses that irrespective of what the executive order says, that it is still illegal under Californian law to engage in foreign bribery. And so they have issued statements that violations of the FCPA, even if they're not going to be addressed by the Attorney General, that they might be actionable under California's unfair competition law. And so we've had that. We've had other countries like France also issue statements on what they would do in terms of addressing foreign bribery, and Switzerland also passed new measures on money laundering and all that. So there has been a global response. So the gap that we envisaged is there, but it's not to the extent that we thought, because yes, as I said, the FCPA did have an outsized role in addressing foreign bribery. But what has been, I think, particularly problematic is in terms of the implications for, countries that were relying on USAID funding to address corruption measures. So we've had nations where they've had fragile democracies and where they have conflicts, which is always a risk for corruption. There's been, those programs have obviously been undermined. There have been new discussions between some African countries and the US government that some of the aid for health policy interventions that was funneled through USAID would now be funneled as to those countries as budget support. Of course, that causes, raises new risks and new modalities for dealing with that. So we don't really know whether that's going to be better or worse in terms of risk of anti-corruption. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, there is going to be limitations in what the enforcement of foreign bribery laws look like, because while the FCPA had a lot of tools and had been doing this for dozens of years, and had been quite successful at it, the countries in Western Europe that are trying to address this issue now don't have as much experience and don't have the same budget. So that's a challenge. I think what hasn't changed at all, and I think we need to take cognizance of that, is the fact that the laws haven't changed. And in terms especially of FCPA enforcement, we have had for the last, 40 years, a lot of prioritization of some aspects and deprioritization of others. So this is not totally new. It is more drastic than we've had in the past, but it's not totally new. And as administrations, determine what their focus is going to be, we will always have, different aspects of the FCPA being prioritized and others being deprioritized. But the FCPA remains a valid law. It's not repealed. It can only be repealed by an act of Congress. And of course, there are other laws in the US that remain, that are still being enforced, like, and of course, as I mentioned already, the UK Bribery Act also has really extensive extraterritorial jurisdiction. So there has been a reorientation of international anti-corruption enforcement. So the US has shifted from being, this global or universal enforcer to being more selective and prioritizing what it believes its needs are at this particular time. USAID has, as one of the most significant funders of anti-corruption and governance and capacity building programs in many developing countries, has stopped. So that has severe consequences. And I think that for me, is actually a bigger problem because, of course, enforcement is addressing something when there's already been an issue, but the soft capacity building and governance issues were designed to prevent and mitigate corruption from happening. And then, of course, we've seen that Europe is trying to fill the enforcement vacuum by creating the task force and all that. Of course, we haven't had enough time to see how successful that is going to be. But it is, I think, a positive development that the global community realizes that I think it was never in anyone's best interest to only have one country taking, you know, the main role in addressing an issue that affects everyone, and an issue that is a networked problem, an issue that is a global problem, an issue that is a cross-border problem. So in a way, I think other countries realizing that they have to, take responsibility for this issue and they have to put their money where their mouth is. I think that is a positive development that has come out of this. So yes, I will stop by saying it has been challenging. It is, difficult, but maybe it's time that the rest of the world grew up. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Sope. So one of the interesting things about being a professor is that we get to be in sort of a trusted space with actors around the world. And you for example, you presented to IFPEC, the International Anti-Corruption Association for large companies working in the space. So talking to people who are doing corporate compliance around the world, we asked them, now that the FCPA is being enforced, not at all, but really, or just being enforced in an incredibly small way regarding organized crime, is now that that's gone, is that changing your compliance posture at all, your compliance structure? And the answer from the folks working in a very sophisticated corporate compliance system is no, actually not at all, because there are all these other laws around the world that have extraterritorial effect. For instance, the Bribery Act in the UK. So what the U.S. has done, as you explained, what the U.S. has essentially done by withdrawing this FCPA enforcement is it's changed the tone from the top. There's still a legal structure that keeps multinationals, for example, from engaging in bribery, but the strong voice from the top is gone. The United States' strong voice has been muted during the Trump administration. So here's a question I have for you. Can others take the place of that voice? Could, for example, President Macron in France or President Ramaphosa in South Africa, could they take the place of the American voice and reinforce the importance of anti-corruption in international procurement?
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. I think no one country can take the voice. I think it was a mistake, but I mean, it was just, it's a historical legacy that the US was at the forefront of addressing foreign bribery. So I think it was a mistake that the US was the main voice, and that should never have been the case. And I mean, from your studies that corruption is a networks problem, corruption is a global problem. So we shouldn't really be looking for one voice. We should be looking for all the voices, because if we are serious about addressing it, then it can't be left to one country where things can change, right? Politics can go in one direction or the other. So I think the fact that the UK has come out strongly, I think France has also come out a little bit strong. Switzerland has come out strong. So I think having more countries, more voices being condemning foreign bribery and taking action against it is possibly what we would need, because then it means that we're relying on a multiplicity of resources and abilities to address corruption as opposed to one voice. Because if the other countries um, had capacitated themselves to address foreign bribery rather than relying on the FCPA, then if there was a shredding of the FCPA, it wouldn't have had the impact that it did have. So I would argue for many voices, and they are coming out. And I think we need to have more countries actually saying, well, if this happens in our jurisdiction and our law and it happens within the jurisdiction of our law, then we will enforce the law.
So last question about the Sope. So one of the questions we ask in the U.S. system is when you have you have a bunch of different policemen trying to keep people honest,
Yeah.
The question is, should the cops cooperate, or is it better for anti-corruption if the policemen don't cooperate? And I have to say, in the federal procurement system in the U.S., the cops are just phenomenally, comically uncooperative. We have the Keystone Cops. The various enforcement agencies oftentimes just don't cooperate with each other. Sometimes they do, but a lot of times they don't, which actually creates more terror in the heart of contractors because they don't know how the various policemen will come at them, so to speak. And they also, it's very difficult to corrupt or persuade all the policemen at the same time if the policemen aren't cooperating. Do you think that anti-corruption actually may work better, Sope, now that we have a multiplicity of enforcement agencies around the world?
Yes, no, definitely. I think it will work better. And I think, as I said already, that it's better all around if we have everyone working towards the same goals when it comes to anti-corruption law and anti-corruption enforcement. And especially when it comes to foreign bribery, right? I mean, by default, you're already dealing with cases that involve at least two countries. So you do need to have cooperation from the countries that are involved. And because of the nature of global finance, the nature of money laundering, you usually end up with having investigations that span many jurisdictions. So I think the more countries that we can have that are dedicated to addressing foreign bribery, the more countries that we can have pooling their resources to address this, I think we would have better outcomes all around.
Thanks very much, Sope. So I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to turn it over to Prabhat. Prabhat, are you with us?
Yeah, hi, good morning, Chris.
Thank you, Sope.
And good morning, everybody, for joining us in this interesting seminar. And thank you, Professor Yukins and colleagues and GW Law for giving us opportunity for pulling all of us together. Thank you for many of our colleagues on this seminar. I know many of them in different time zones are giving up your leisure time. Maybe in some countries you're giving your sleeping time to listen to us. We hope we are making it worth your while. In this topic, fraud and corruption, as you heard from Professor Yukins and Professor Williams, it encompasses everything: contract management, legal framework, evaluation panels, and developing specifications, as we all know in the field. So I would rather not talk about the theory or the legal framework. There are more competent people to talk about that. I'm a practitioner, as Chris introduced me as for last 40 years, first with the World Bank, then with Millennium Challenge Corporation. So I would like to draw from real life examples. And Chris, thanks for putting this slide up. Myself and Vinay Sharma, Mr. Vinay Sharma from former World Bank and African Development Bank, head of procurement, we have written a book which is coming out shortly. This book is full of real life experiences of the entire international development, not only fraud and corruption. So it will be available soon. Next slide, please. During next 15-20 minutes, I would like to share my practitioner's perspective on fraud and corruption. I would like to get away from bringing cops into picture to catch us. We should aim to design the systems where systems work themselves without getting cops and courts involved in the corruption and the procurement side, at least. So I will share real life examples. I will also talk about causes and mitigants of the fraud and corruption. And I would like to leave you with some thoughts on the future of integrity and the fraud and corruption. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, the previous slide. So I would like to draw on Albert Einstein's famous quote, it says, so long as there are men, there will be wars. I would like to adopt that to say, so long as there are men, there will be corruption. And man means all genders here. So corruption is something not that we can eliminate completely. So that will be an unrealistic goal to eliminate corruption because that's a human nature. In my talk, I will share some examples where we can say corruption is not limited to certain countries or certain positions or certain institutions. It is limited to human nature. FNC risk, as you all know, will never be zero. We need to see how to manage those risks. Next slide, please. I would like to, though, start with something that we as practitioners, we face a perception problem. If it is government procurement, there must be some corruption. We all assume that. In many countries, it has become the fact of life. People don't even question that if there's a government procurement, why is there corruption? So, as I said, corruption will be there, and corruption happens in all sides. There are buyers, there are bidders, there are funding agencies. Everybody, and I don't say that lightly, I have experienced a lot of it myself in my 40 years, but everybody is responsible for having high integrity. Everybody is responsible for watching against corruption. And still there are some things happen. I must say that majority of us, including many of our colleagues here, work honestly, whether they are lawyers or they are engineers or they are procurement professionals, they are contract managers, government officers, donor officers, bidders. Majority are honest and working upfront. Procurement and fraud and corruption are most systemic problems. So when the system gives an opportunity, then bad actors will take advantage of those opportunities. So we should think about designing the systems where the opportunities are reduced. And I also want to differentiate that domestic procurement versus international public procurement, where our book is focused on. Yes, corruption does exist in international public procurement as well, which refers, in my terminology, I am referring to the donor-funded programs, multilateral development banks, or bilateral agencies. It does exist in IPPs. It is serious. It damages development, and it destroys public trust. However, I would like to say, based on my experience, that under IPP, the corruption is not as bad as its critics, harshest critics would like to say, but it is not as good as practitioners like me would like to believe in. So it's not as clean, but not as bad either. You all must have seen some advocacy groups claiming 30 to 50% of the money is lost to corruptions. It is high, but under IPP, it is not that high. Next slide, please. So in our book, we demonstrate through real-life experiences, real-life examples, that corruption exists on all sides. So again, it is not limited to certain groups. Like sometimes when we are talking about corruption, we talk about corrupt bidders or corrupt government officials. We cannot really classify corruption limited to certain group. A strong oversight always helps. Audit, inspection, as Professor Williams was talking about, independent integrity offices, whistleblower lines, bid challenge systems, all of those help in enforcing the requirements. All of that help in scaring people off, bringing the cops in. But as procurement professional, my intention is to enforce this or develop the systems where we don't need all that. We shouldn't be looking at how many audits we did. We should be looking at how many successful development outcomes we had. But we have to recognize, as I said earlier, so long as they are men, there will be corruption. Our objective is to improve integrity. Next slide, please. So real life examples from the book. Again, there is nothing unique about it. I'm sure you have all seen these, and worse than this, I'm sure. people who are in the procurement field or contract administration field or the legal field. These are our day-to-day lives. We see these things. However, I'm just putting them here to set the context. And these are, again, real-life cases which actually happened with us working on the donor agency sides, World Bank, MCC. I have myself seen these things. Vehicle procurement in Central Africa. Specification required snow tires for their cars. Really, the country never has seen snow in last 300 years of their existence. So there's no snow. Obviously, they were trying to direct to somebody. Individual consultant to be hired. Requirement exactly matches number of years, qualifications, past experience to somebody who was just retiring from that job. So instead of following a sole source requirement and justification, the buyers or the developers of a specification decided to just have an open competition with the tailored specification. That's the fraud and corruption. Software procurement in East Asia, sole source and direct contract. One software which everybody knows, in this case, it was Norton antivirus program. Requirement comes with $30,000 sole source procurement to a specific dealer with the dealer's letter quoting the price and claiming they are the only authorized dealers of Norton in the country, and signed off by the senior government official to say government has been buying this software at this price. A very simple question raised, and this was in my case by the donor agency. Go on the Google, write a question, are there authorized dealers of this software in this country? 68 authorized dealers showed up just in the city capital. Clearly, it was stopped, and when the competition, again, competition, one of the big deterrent to fraud and corruption, competition was enforced, the software was bought for less than $1,000. So these are the funding agencies are able to detect and block these cases. But here it is to show that how things happen. Next slide, please.
So can I ask you a quick question, Prabhat, about this? So a colleague, Lee Bradley, she was the head of the office of the ethics office in the Defense Department, the Standards of Conduct, and she also really expanded a volume they put together of the stupid ethical lapses. Dishonest things people have done across the Defense Department for over the years. And she did that not only to make fun of these people, to mock the people who had done things that were wrong, but also for the readers, for the audience, to refocus them on what their mission was. So their mission is to serve the Defense Department well, to advance U.S. national security. And so it wasn't just a mocking game. It was it was forcing the professionals to refocus on what their true mission is. In your view, should our colleagues internationally, should they be collecting stories like these so that they can use them as a talking point, a lesson for procurement officials in their own country to focus on what their true mission is?
Absolutely. I think that's a very good suggestion. As we collect the stories, whether they are convicted stories or whether they are anticipated stories or whether they are suspected stories, they always help in improving the, if only perception or the reality, both. And of course, when you put them in what I call wall of shame, then obviously scare some other people from not doing the same thing. Moving on with some real life examples, bidders, fraud and corruption. I'm sure everybody has seen everything possible. Inflated, fabricated past performance, exaggerated previous assignment roles, falsified CVs and degrees, ghost experts who never existed in real life, counterfeit bid securities, attempts to bribe the government officials, evaluation panel. Everybody has seen all these things. So bidders, as we like to say, corruption schemes are as numerous as the bidders themselves. Again, as I said earlier, if there is an opportunity, some bad actors will try to take the opportunity. So we should try to control the opportunity. Next slide, please.
Just a quick question on this, Prabhat. So the European Union is moving very aggressively now to encourage cross-border exchange of information, data between member states. And we're going to see that through open contracting initiatives. We're going to see that internationally more and more of an exchange. And one of the questions is, where is the first emphasis? Is the first emphasis going to be on contractor qualification and issues of corruption? Will that be the first data that governments share with each other effectively? Do you see, is that a fair guess, Prabhat, that in fact that will be the first area of transnational inter-country cooperation, questions of qualification and corruption?
That does sound like one of very good starting points. I would also add the past contractor performance in their countries would become very important also. So if that will scare bad guys, that if you misperform in one country or do corruption in one country, everybody will hear about it. So if your performance is poor in one place, you not only lose Brussels, you also lose France and other EU members. So go back one slide. Oh yeah, real life example, donor agency staff. I say again, don't say that lightly, but it does happen. Again, when there is an opportunity, somebody will try to take advantage of that. In one case, in Africa Agriculture Project, through a whistleblower, it was identified donor agency project manager was collaborating with the government officials and the contractors to siphon money to his relatives in different countries. And it came out from a whistleblower, and it was so blatant that they were not only cash transfer, they were done through electronic means, so they are full track records of who gave the money and where it went. Of course, there were strong actions taken. The other one, Middle East water well project in the remote areas, couple of donor agencies got involved, funding the digging of water wells in remote areas for drinking as well as for use of animals. And another international agency was hired on the payment basis to supervise the implementation. For 1.5 years, reports kept coming, wells were completed, sites were visited, contractor had completed wells, contractor invoices are there, and the site visit reports are there, and donors are dispersing the money. A whistleblower report to a local newspaper unraveled everything. Literally everything was false. Every contractor invoice, every site report, everything was fabricated. For 1.5 years, not even a single well was dug there. It was obviously nobody visited the sites where the supervision is very important. And many people were involved throughout the chain here. So these examples illustrate two important points. One is all these site visits are very important. And second is in finding a fraud and corruption does not require deep investigations. If you ask one simple question, that software example, do one site visit or do one stakeholder interview, it can easily start unraveling there. So very simple day-to-day action which all of us take in our daily life can help stop fraud and corruption. But again, the central message of these examples is that corruption is rarely a failure of one individual or one agency. It is usually a failure of a system. It's a systemic problem which allows safeguards to break down. Next slide, please. In summary, or using these examples and other things I have seen, it is, again, doing a day-to-day job is where we can stop a lot of corruption. Procurement officers insisting on proper documentation. Decision makers, whether procurement officers or their managers, reading the evaluation reports, not just signing them. Donor government staff conducting site visits. Normal, just go and visit the site and see if there's a well really built or not. Don't just rely on the paper reports. Evaluators doing their job honestly, declaring the conflict of interest. Auditors looking at detailed reports. Bidding community, private sector really following on their oath of integrity, which is most of the time they sign. Very, very simple steps. Next slide, please. Talking about the prevention and these simple steps, I want to draw your attention to one very simple preventive measure done by one of the funding agencies where I worked. In this agency, we put all the teams together. We said program managers, program designers, procurement people, contract managers, government guys, sit down together and we are tasking you to steal money from this project. Look from the beginning till end of the pipeline and tell us how will you steal money. Initially, of course, very difficult conversation and meetings were awkward, but very soon people started understanding that and where the risks are, and they started developing measures how to stop that risk. All those findings were converted into risk registers, and those risk registers assigned responsibilities to all of those individuals, project managers, engineers, supervisors, procurement people, how to deal with those risks and keep them updating as the risks evolve. Very simple, but very effective preventive measure. Next slide, please.
Prabhat, and I just wanted to maybe complement on what you were saying on the importance of risk mitigating measures, especially when it comes to disbursements, just making sure that really no funds are paid in advance if possible, and that payments are only made once milestones have been reached. And there is documentation that that shows that. It is, I've been involved in the design of many of these programs. Very often these are seen as administrative burdens, but I can't emphasize how important these structures are to make sure that funds are not misappropriated, and at least there are measures that can be taken in case this happens.
Thank you. Thank you. Very, very important point. Next slide, please. So if today somebody asks me what is one important thing which will help in avoiding procurement, fraud, and corruption during the procurement process, I would say it is not a fear of audit. I would say it's not a fear of being arrested. It's a competition. The more we increase the competition, the less incentives will be there, the less opportunities will be there on the bidder side to influence the decision, on the buyer side to gain favors. Then both sides will, because you don't know when you have very wide competition, who is going to compete. So it will take discretion away from the decision makers. And then procurement people, of course, have to stay on top of that. So competition is one of the strongest anti-corruption tools. Next slide, please. AI obviously will help us in due time when it develops. We'll talk about it a little later. Next slide, please. So there are, sorry, can we go back 2 slides? I missed that part. So there are 3 integrity challenges coming up in the current world. It is, the slide which you talk about climate finance, please. So in the there climate finance where a lot of funding is going right now. The term used is greenwashing, where a lot of fake claims are there. We need to watch out for things about the climate finance. Then there, of course, a lot of digital systems are coming up in procurement. Very important. They produce very good safeguards. They improve the efficiency of the procurement system, but of course, they improve the vulnerability. So as we know, digital systems can be hacked, digital systems can be manipulated as well. So as procurement professionals, we have to watch out for those things. And third is artificial intelligence. So on artificial intelligence, of course, let's go back to Chris to artificial intelligence slide. AI in procurement has become the buzzword of the day, as we know. Past trend analysis, past pricing analysis, engaging with the market, as Matteo said on the first day, is very important. AI helps in that also, as well as generative AI can give you the future also. But there are limitations right now for AI in procurement. AI is fully dependent on the data that is fed into the LLMs, the large models. And data, especially in MDV procurement right now, is little too fragmented, and also the questionable quality in some cases. So therefore, the data quality has to improve for AI to be really reliable. Then the second thing in the AI in procurement is that they can never replace humans. But human development needs to take place, which right now is not happening in most many organizations. Humans have to understand how the outcome of an AI model has been generated, which is right now not understood that well. When we are doing procurement, we have to be ready for challenges from the losing bidders. Can the AI outcome really help us develop a bid challenge system which can be defended in a court? We are not there yet. Hopefully, we'll reach there one day. So AI in procurement will help the procurement professionals improve their efficiency, give them past trends, but they will never be replacing the humans. AIs cannot do your site interviews. AI cannot do stakeholder analysis. AI does not do site visits. Humans will have to do that. So therefore, AI in procurement will be strengthening the procurement system. It will not be replacing the human systems. Next slide, please.
If I could just throw a quick thing in here. So a big problem in corruption is the information asymmetry between the government and its contractors, and AI can start to fix that. So last week, a funny story is that I was lecturing about a certain procurement, and I looked at the specifications, and I said, "Oh, these specifications are awfully tight. I can't believe." I said, "Let's just put these specifications through AI." And within 10 seconds, it turned out the specifications identified a specific product in the world, one product. I thought, oh my gosh, this is a new way to use AI to deal with the problem we've been dealing with, for millennia in procurement. How do you tell if in fact the specifications are wired?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So in the interest of time, I know I have run out of my time. We can jump to the future of procurement slide. How do we know that our anti-corruption strategies are working? Traditionally, as Professor Williams and Professor Yukins were talking about investigations, about sanctions, how many companies have been debarred worldwide? Yes, there are important statistical measures, but as procurement professionals, for us, the measure should be different. Our indicator should be different. Our indicator should be how many more firms are participating. Are we increasing competitiveness? How many first-time bidders are getting encouraged to participate in government bidding and not shying away because all government procurement is corrupt? Are we shortening the procurement cycle by using digital platforms or by using AI? Are we getting better quality bids, more market engagement? Are we able to understand the market? Does market understand us? And are we having successful contract implementation? Are we really making sure that wells are dug on the ground? Technology cannot do it. We'll have to do it. Can we have the really all these things as a procurement system, which include legal framework, which includes evaluation panels, contract management system? Can we have a system at some point, hopefully not at least in my lifetime, where public will stop worrying about corruption in public procurement, but they will start being surprised when they see a news of corruption in the newspaper because they are not used to seeing corruption in public procurement. That is the day we should be striving for. And one day our systems can be there, they are not there right now. A final reflection allow me to conclude where I began. So long as they are men, there will be corruption. So achieving zero corruption is an unrealistic goal. Our objective should be to strengthen the systems where opportunities for corruption are reduced and incentives are taken away, where the people, bidders, buyers, and donors, they all strive toward the same goal. To increase, and the goals are increasing transparency, strengthen institution, encourage genuine competition, improve accountability, and ultimately to make integrity as a norm of public procurement. So in my closing remarks, I want to leave you with one thought or few thoughts. Integrity is not created by investigations. It's created by thousands of honest people like you and me who are working in the field, making day-to-day decisions honestly and working in detail. Future of anti-corruption is not merely fighting corruption. It should be to increase the integrity in the systems that we catch the bad guys before it happens. Catching them after it happens is already too late. Good procurement systems should not depend on good people. People are not good. As we know, this is human nature. Good systems should depend on assuming people are human, and human nature will remain human nature. But how can we reduce opportunity for misconduct and make integrity as the first choice for the humans who operate in this field? Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Yukins.
Thank you, Prabhat. I really appreciate it. As noted before, the slides will be posted, and the slides include Prabhat's email address if you want to contact him about a discount on his forthcoming book. So I just want to close by talking about the major procurement reform efforts that we've been reviewing this week, the UNCITRAL efforts, the EU efforts, the US efforts, what's going on in South Africa. And in South Africa, for example, the new South African regulations that are under review right now explicitly call for a risk management system to be built into large construction projects. What you're seeing, once you take a step back and once you look at all these various procurement reform efforts going on internationally, it's really a step beyond what the OECD report, there's an image of here and is also on the Public Procurement International page. The OECD report from June of 2023 talked about public procurement as a risk management effort. And when you see public procurement in those terms, that it's not a matter of yes, no rules, but it's a matter of a highly professionalized risk management, then you begin to see the integration between anti-corruption rules and good procurement rules. Good procurement rules are about risk management, anti-corruption is about risk management, and all the pieces start to fit together. And that's a very important insight that these various reform efforts running in parallel offer us. I just want to close. I've been reflecting over the last few days why a colleague asked, why did you do this series, Chris? Why did you do this series on international development, given all the cutbacks that have been in international aid, especially in the US, but in the last couple of days we saw them, for example, in the UK as well. Why did you do this? And I joked, I said, I like to play baseball in the rain. Playing baseball in the rain is uniquely difficult, but it improves your skills. And that was kind of a silly answer. I think what we learned over the last few days is that even with the massive cuts in international development that have come, what you've seen from the professionals that have been presenting over the last few days, what you've seen from our audience members that have been participating through the chat, what we see every day in the classroom from our students and from our colleagues internationally, is a tremendous commitment to international development. Everybody who's involved in this field understands that what's at stake is men, women, and children in individual countries. And we have to hold the community together and build capacity in that community to continue to serve those people. So the funding, the cut in funding is not irrelevant, but it's not at the core. The core here is a commitment that all these professionals hold and hold very dearly. So with that, I want to sign off and thank all the panelists for the wonderful. Any last words, Benedetta?
Yes, actually. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. I just wanted to add to what you were saying about the importance of international development despite the current funding challenges. There are still thousands of opportunities out there. I think it's important to highlight this despite the cuts. And also, many of the funding cuts affect the staff costs, but there's still thousands of projects that are being implemented all over the world. And again, I just wanted to, as I always do, put things in perspective. Let's just remember the impact that international development has on people's lives and the fact that these rules are not abstract. They are extremely important because when a project is well implemented, it can really save lives. And so it is a responsibility on all of us, professors, practitioners, students, those who are interested in the field, to make sure that the system is appropriate for the objectives it is intended to reach. So I really hope that this series helped everyone just remember why this is such a very important field of law and how impactful it is. So thanks again.
Very wisely said, Nasadia. Thank you. Thank you all. Have a good day. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.